Hi everyone, Lior is here with another Jumpstart Lightning episode. Today we are continuing our ArcBox Nuts and Bolts video series. I have Seif with me today to talk to me about everything that is networking and security inside ArcBox. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, Lior is here, and today I have Seif with me from the Jumpstart team to talk to me about everything that is ArcBox network and security. Seif, how are you doing?
Great, Leo. Thank you. Great to be back on the show.
Yeah, I was enjoying our previous episode when we talked about some configuration management stuff. But today, as you being part of the Jumpstart team, you came to talk to me about everything that is network and security as part of this nuts and bolts video series that we're doing for ArcBox. But before we get going, tell the audience who you are and what is it that you do.
Sure. So my name is Seif Basim. I'm a customer engineer at Microsoft. My role is basically to help customers be successful in Azure, architecting different solutions, and of course, working with Azure Arc solutions.
So, say if you've been part of the Jumpstart team for a few months now, how does it feel?
It feels great. It's great to see how the Arc landscape is evolving and working with the Jumpstart and having lots of use scenarios and working on ArcBox has been an incredible experience.
Yeah, and we see the arc space is growing. That's for sure. Safe. Today's episode is really about going deeper into the networking and security aspect, and to maybe to tee things up. This is, obviously networking security is a big part of any architecture, and our box is no different. Um, Share with me a bit and share with the audience, like, what are the things that we are thinking about when we are developing our box, and what are the new things that we implemented as part of this release.
Yeah, and we've been looking through a lot of asks from the field using and the users using ArcBox to introduce some of the capabilities to further increase the security of ArcBox. One of the most top requested one is adding Bastion to be
Hmm.
able to connect to Jumpstart. And we've taken this feedback and we've added other capabilities to make sure that although this is considered a sandbox environment to try out Arc, but we try to take security seriously. We try to apply the best practices as much as we can without affecting the user experience with ArcBox and the Jumpstart scenarios in general.
Yeah, and I know that today you have some stuff to show me and few architecture diagram to share with the audience, and maybe just to emphasize, really, network and security is something that we're taking very seriously. And like you mentioned, although our box is a sandbox environment, but still it's a sandbox environment that we're also seeing people taking the code and manipulating that and trying to do things with it with their own environment. So we wanted to just provide them with all the security weapons that are at our disposal. So that's what we did with this release.
Absolutely. And let me dive in and talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Sure.
So here you can see the full architecture of ArcBox. And Matt talked about the automation behind it to build all of what you see now on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down onto the network and security pieces a little bit. So if you look here, you see that we have a layer of Azure services, and those are mainly to manage and protect the Arc resources that we're going to deploy. And below them is the infrastructure layer, which is the client VM and the Kubernetes clusters that we deploy and connect to Arc and give you
Mhm.
all of the magic that you would use in ArcBox. So if we double click a little bit into the underlying infrastructure, mainly the networking, you would see once you deploy ArcBox that we have two main virtual networks.
Mhm.
So we have a virtual network that has the client VM, which is the main VM that triggers the automation, and you would do all of the scenarios from within it.
Mhm.
And you have also a K3S cluster, Kubernetes cluster, and a management cluster for the CAPI Kubernetes. Um, the other VNet is mainly for the workload cluster for CAPI, and we put it in another virtual network because it's considered a workload. It has the workload node, so it's better to separate it into a different VNet.
Hmm.
And if you look at the VNets, each VNet has some subnets, and each subnet is protected by a network security group that is close to only the required ports. So you won't find any management ports that are opened on the network security group, and only the needed traffic is available through
Hmm.
the NSGs.
And this is actually an enhancement that we came up. Like we always had this notion of blocking ports on the network security group, but we also had some issues with regards to, okay, so how do we map out what is actually required? What are the things that we can drop? And we also took that one step further, and I'm sure that obviously you're going to explain the audience about this as well.
Absolutely. And let me actually go to the Azure portal to just
Hmm.
show you how it looks like. So if I switch quickly, I have two ArcBox deployments already in place. So let
Hmm.
me show you. If we look at the networking, we have two virtual networks
Hmm.
as we've talked about. And if we looked at the main virtual network, we have a network security group attached to its subnet. And you can see here that we have only the ports needed for the clusters to function, and also for the scenarios that you're going to do in ArcBox
Hmm.
to demonstrate the different features. So it's pretty much locked down to only the things that you would need in ArcBox.
Okay. Okay. So what are the extra things that we took under consideration besides the fact that we did some good due diligence on the ports mapping?
Yes, so let me go back to the slides. We've also thought a little bit about how you would connect to the client VM, because
Hmm.
the client VM is your door to ArcBox, and we don't want it to be publicly available on the internet. All of the management ports are wide open. So what we've done is that we've allowed for three different methods that you would connect to the client VM.
Hmm.
And you would connect either directly through its public IP address, but again, it's locked. The network security group is locked in. You have to open an inbound port manually to be able to do so. As you've talked, we've done Bastion. It's
Mhm.
an option as well. And lastly, you can also connect using just-in-time access if you have Microsoft Defender for Cloud enabled on your subscription.
So basically, three options to connect to our box. That's what we're doing today. And again, we implemented Bastion just because, obviously it was one of the most requested feature. So how does that look like?
Sure, let me show you. So the first method is the most simple one. So you don't want to deploy Bastion. Maybe it's just a small sandbox. You just need to deploy ArcBox and just connect to it. So the first scenario is simply connecting through the public IP address of the client VM. And
Mhm.
uh, after you deploy ArcBox, if you try to connect, you're not going to be able to RDP into the client VM. You would have to manually allow your IP address or your subnet to be able to RDP to the client VM. So
Hmm.
port 3389 needs to be opened manually to allow you to do so.
And the client VM, let's just make sure everyone understand. Matt also talking about that in another episode that we had in this nuts and bolts video series. The client VM, that's where the automation starts, right? I mean, that's
Exactly.
where everything happens, and that's how our box is actually getting provisioned with all the logic. So that's a mandatory step. You need to log into the client machine in order for you to actually start the RBox deployment.
Exactly. That's the first step that you need to do after deploying ArcBox. Before that, you won't be able to connect the client VM until you select the right method for you to connect, and then implement the steps that we define in the README for ArcBox.
Got it.
Okay. So that's the first step, the first method. The second method is again, the client VM has a public IP address, but in that case, you might be using Defender for Cloud. It
Mm.
might be enabled on your subscription, and you need to leverage this capability. So in that essence, you can enable just-in-time access, which allows you to dynamically manage the network security group and have timed access to the client VM. And in that way, you can make sure that you don't forget a network security group with any-to-any traffic, RDP traffic opened over the internet.
And Saif, I'm a big fan of just-in-time access because just talking about it from from my own personal experience, when we started developing RBox in the first version of RBox, and even before we released the new flavor, RBox for DevOps, we always had this implementation of putting the public IP, your public IP, whether you're at home or in your office, putting that public IP in the ARM template or the Terraform vars file, parameters file, or bicep, and basically we will infuse that public IP to the network security group, inbound rules, and eventually you will get access via RDP or SSH to the Linux machine. But we removed that from basically from the template, and now the only way for you to actually do this the right way is via the first method that you mentioned, but the just-in-time makes it so easy. I personally use it all the time because I'm not deploying Bastion each and every deployment that I'm doing for RBox, but I am deploying RBox, obviously, and I am using the just-in-time, and it makes it super easy. I mean, you just click, you have that just-in-time. After maybe 5-10 seconds, everything is open for you, and like you said, it's time bombed. So that's cool.
Yeah, and you don't forget the IP address there. If you do asterisks instead of doing an IP address and you forget about it, then your machine is wide open. So
Yeah.
just-in-time access takes care of the housekeeping.
Cool.
Okay. So this is the second method. The third method is Bastion. So in that scenario, the public IP addresses are stripped from the VMs. The VMs do not have a public IP address, and you have Bastion deployed within the ArcBox resource group. In that case, you can only connect to the client VM through Bastion, which takes away a lot of security concerns and worries about how to secure this client VM. You'll find that in the Bastion part, you find that there is a network security group. Bastion, as you know, it lies within its own subnet, and we also apply a network security group there to make sure that only the ports that are required by Bastion that are in the documentation are allowed to have it to function properly and give you this layer of security to connect to the client VM.
Seif, would it be fair to say that Bastion is probably the most secure way to do this type of stuff? I mean, to connect to, this is not just for RBox. Bastion is part of, let's just call it a best practice, really, because like you said, we're stripping down the public IPs from those machines that we're trying to connect. Would it be fair to say that this is the most secure way to connect to RBox?
I would totally agree with that. Yes, it is, and it has been one of the top asks that we've got through the Azure Arc Jumpstart project, and that complements what you were just saying about it being the best practice.
So show me, how does that look in the portal?
Sure. Let me go back to the portal. So here let me show you first the first two methods. So let me go to the ArcBox resource group, and if I go to my client VM, in that case, since I've not deployed Bastion, you see that I still have a public IP address for this machine. But if I go to networking and look at the network security group, I don't have RDP available. So that means that I cannot connect. All I need to do to start playing with ArcBox is I need to whitelist my IP address, my public IP address. Let me put anything here for now. And I should select RDP. Where did RDP go?
I'm sure it's somewhere. I know we're doing a great job in Azure to potentially hide things from you.
Yeah. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so, and I just say allow RDP, and that's it. So now after this rule takes effect, now I can go to the client VM and I can download the RDP file and start connecting directly for the automation to kick off. That's the first method.
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, exactly. The second method is the just-in-time access. So in that case, I can enable it from Defender for Cloud Portal, or I can simply enable it from the virtual machine blade. So I'm going to go to Configuration, click Enable Just-in-Time Access, and that's it. I don't need to do anything else. So let me show you what has this very simple method has done. So if I scroll a little bit down here, you'll find that there is a new security network security rule that has been created to allow me to connect to the private IP address of the client VM.
Yeah, and like I said, just-in-time access is a very elegant way to just quickly connect, and it's really, if we're thinking about the prioritization of those security methods or those secured methods to connect to ArcBox, like you said, the public IP, maybe not the most secure way, but then once you enable in just-in-time, I think that this is where things are starting to be a bit more real world in terms of how people are going to use this. So, yeah.
True. Yes, agreed. And this comes to the third method, which is the top one in terms of being the most secure, is Bastion. So here I have another ArcBox deployment. You can see that this time I have Bastion deployed in my resource group. And if I go to my virtual machine, you're going to see that I don't have any public IP address assigned to this virtual machine. So in that case, I need to connect through Bastion, supply the username and password I've added in the templates, and then I can connect to the client VM and get the automation started, and then get all the goodness from ArcBox.
Yeah. So, if you've been using, for the viewers, if you've been using ArcBox and you've been asking for this, so now this is going to be implemented. And Seif, last question, Bastion and all these methods, are they going to be available on all flavors of ArcBox or just in the new flavor?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, it's going to be available across flavors. So if you're using IT Pro, if you're using DevOps, then you're going to be able to use any of those three methods.
Cool. So we implement that across the board. So Seif, I wanted to say thank you for coming and explaining this. Networking is a big portion of ArcBox. We always said that there's a lot of moving parts, and we are trying to do our best to strip down and streamline that process for the end user, so they will not have to think about this. So I'm super happy to see that we implemented all these network and security related features and this new architecture that we came up with this flavor. And like you said, this is going to be applied across the board, right?
True. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Seif, for coming. I did want to make sure that the Jumpstart audience, if you guys are curious to hear more about ArcBox, the new things that we're coming up with, and also continue watching this ArcBox Nuts and Bolts video series, make sure that you're liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps us grow tremendously. It helps us bring other folks to the channel and continue to grow and provide more quality content to the hybrid cloud community for Azure. So Seif, just want to say thank you so much for coming and all the hard work that you've been doing on ArcBox and being basically the architect for everything that is networking and security inside that solution.
Thank you, Lior, and I'm hope people start using ArcBox and give us ideas and give us feedback, and I hope people enjoy using ArcBox.
100%. We love to see those GitHub issues coming and for us to jump on those. So thank you so much, Seif, and thank you so much for the audience for watching this episode of ArcBox Nuts and Bolts. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.